Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, People Helping People. I'm Shara Goswick, your host. My guest today is Eric Robinson. Eric is a former pastor turned FBI agent and is now retired, and he has a book coming out later this year that I cannot wait to read. We had a great conversation. He shared some behind the scenes things about being an FBI agent and working on a SWAT team. He talked about who should apply, who should not apply, and what the application process for working for the FBI was like. You may learn some things listening to this, but it was very fun, and I'm so thankful to share this conversation with you. Thanks for being here. Eric, I am excited to talk to you today. And, you've got a really cool background being a retired FBI agent. And I was thinking this morning, there are a handful of people that I get nervous talking to, but I thought I have a very healthy fear of getting in trouble, like law enforcement. So I thought this is a little intimidating talking to this retired FBI agent. Just your position, it's a little intimidating. So I am excited because I know you've got some cool stories probably. And you can give us insight behind the scenes what it's like being a retired agent. But is that something you grew up wanting to do, was be an FBI agent?
Well, so what's funny is I've had colleagues and through a course of discussion, how did you get involved? And I have one friend, Laura, who says, well, I studied this in college because I met somebody when I was 12. And then I took this job and then this career so that I could be an FBI agent. How was it for you? And I said, oh, I thought it'd be cool. So on a whim, I applied. And
Wow.
and it's, I wouldn't have a beautiful wife if I didn't take shots at, something that was out of my league, and,
There
yeah,
you go.
I thought the FBI was out of my league, and they came back and said, "Oh, let's go for a second round."
What is the application process like? Like, I'm sure it's not just filling out a paper. Like, what do you have to do to apply to be in the FBI?
Well, I applied 25 years ago, so it has changed, and the internet was fairly nascent then, so it was paper for me, and I remember photocopying what I had done because it was I don't know, it's like 60 pages. It's
Oh,
ev
wow.
everywhere you've ever lived since you were 16, every job, um, where all people in your family, contacts from roommates. So it is very in depth for the background.
Sure.
And then there's the basics of you have to have a bachelor's degree at least, and you have to have a clean criminal history. So, those things I thought, okay, well, that's fine. And when I had applied, uh, the next step, an applicant coordinator looks at it and says, "Oh, okay, you seem decent. Let's move you on." And the next step was taking a test, which is kind of like an SAT. And I
Mm.
took it and I thought, well, at least I tried. And when they called back, I went, oh my goodness. From there, the rest is interview where you tell about a situation you're in, what you did and what the outcome was, and then um, a written essay on how you'd handle situations. And at that point, I thought, okay, well, I've got this because those things I have more control over. The fit test, I knew would be fine. I'd been exercising and running marathons, so like no problem. Although that is what trips up many
Oh,
applicants,
yeah.
is the fit test. The answers are there, but they're not ready for it.
Right. So now you talked about in the beginning filling out all that, the application of where you worked and where you lived. Now can't they just find that all out without you filling out a paper?
Well, right. They can, but now you're doing 5 times as much work, like, well, let's put it on you, and
Yeah.
I I was a fitness instructor among many other things when I was in the bureau, and I had one kid that came through when I was in Chicago, and at the time, it was sit-ups and then a sprint, then push-ups and a mile-and-a-half run, and the kid failed even though he was a lean guy, failed the sit-ups. So part of that is you have a number to get, you also have to do in the protocol, and I
Right.
think I took maybe 5 off. He went through and just killed the rest of the fit test. Even though he knew he was out, he still gave a great effort. I came to the applicant coordinator and I said, "Hey, I think I might have miscounted his sit-ups. I think he probably got this number enough to
Right.
pass." And she says, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do that because he really gave an effort." And I told the kid this, "Remember that you got this chance."
Right.
And then I kept tabs on him. which didn't take long because I found out he completely bombed the polygraph because
Oh, no.
he committed so many crimes he never admitted to, and, I almost let a felon in the FBI for beating
Oh,
me, so
wow. Well, it was the thought that counted, I guess. You're having faith
try
in somebody.
trying to be a nice guy.
Right. Okay, here's a question I have, and this I say this from someone who has watched movies and read books. Anytime, not anytime, just from, like I said, what I've seen in the movies. When there's a situation going on and the local law enforcement is involved and then FBI comes in and then local law enforcement gets so angry, does that really happen in real life? Like, is there a tension between the 2?
Well, it can happen, but by far, my experience has been that we both know our places.
Right.
So if the FBI steps in, it isn't like out of our way, we've got control now. It's more of a discussion between people higher up to say, or it could even be between an agent and a detective like me and somebody else to say, look, they know, hey, this is going to be a heavier hammer if we charge them federally. So we'll
Right.
work the case together. That guy will get credit. I'll get credit. Like, and it's fine. So most times, a lot of times the locals recognize like, man, my caseload is stacked. I just got to clear things. Have at it. I had a guy once bring me in on the confession, and that the first serial in my file was the subject confession for embezzling like $127,000. And he's like, I've got too many cases. Take this federal, come listen to her confess, and we go from there. So most times it's really well coordinated
Yeah.
where we might even come to the locals and say, hey, can you get a quick state charge on these guys?
Yeah. It's all very interesting to me. I read that you were a SWAT operator. Is SWAT this is probably a stupid question. I don't know. You think of SWAT, you think of people surrounding a home and, trying to get is that what it is pretty much what it is?
Yeah.
Trying to get somebody?
S so, I'd been a SWAT operator for 15 years, and in the FBI, that's an ancillary job, so I've got my caseload, and then also getting called out, doing training, waking up early for this arrest, and we start out with years before, we would engage the subjects using speed, surprise, and violence of action. So that means we show up quiet, announce our presence, boom, hit the door, and, are standing on his chest before he gets out of bed. Well, now we recognize that's a bit dangerous if they want to oppose us. And so now what we do is we set up a tactical L where we've got eyes on every part of the house.
Yeah.
Everyone knows their job. We send the smallest number of people necessary to complete a task because imagine if we are coming to arrest you and you want to violently oppose us, you would rather have 12 people on the front step rather than 4,
Right.
because if you start spraying, more harm done. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we have our loudspeakers announcing our presence and saying, "Look, come out because nothing good can happen." And we have our crisis negotiators integrated well so that they are doing the call outs, they're on the phone calling in and in a sense setting up the house for us to succeed.
Yeah.
Then if it's barricaded, now we're turning it over to them for a time until it's our turn again.
Wow. Were you ever afraid in situations that you did? Were you ever worried that your life, okay, this could be it?
I I know it sounds macho, but I was never afraid.
Yeah.
I I knew what I was capable of and how well I was trained, and I knew the guy next to me was at least as good as me.
Yeah.
And so the only thing that I was concerned with was what's my role? I don't want to mess up. The one time I encountered a sobering understanding of the situation was we had a barricaded subject in Youngstown, Ohio. A woman who had a mental break and her 10-year-old son was with her. She had pointed a gun at police
Mhm.
officers and then barricaded herself. And we were relieving the SWAT team that was watching her all night. They'd cleared out the apartments. We were in an apartment down the hall, and we're letting the negotiators do their thing while we're poised. And one of our triggers to breach and go in was if she threatened her child or if she fired a shot.
Yeah.
And I remember as we're ready to go, she fired a shot through the door at our robot because she, the voices told her to. And I looked over to my team leader, said, "That's a shot. Are we going?" And we stood down because we still felt like the negotiators had more to do. But I remember thinking as we were preparing to go in, some of us are going to get shot
Yeah.
and that's probably going to hurt.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking, eh, here we go. I guess that's going to be a new life experience for me is
Wow.
finding out what it feels like to get shot. And
Wow.
fortunately, we got through that. She eventually shot at the next SWAT team and was then killed by a sniper.
Mm. Gosh. I'm sure you saw a lot. I'm sure there was a lot of hard things like that. That's not something anybody wants to ever see, but I can imagine in that work. Were you able to mentally just kind of separate yourself from that or
I, I didn't feel like it really bore on me. And I found that agents handled that by talking
yeah.
and not like, "Hey man, I'm having a tough time," but more of just sharing stories
Yeah.
of discussing the adventures. And you're always laughing about it, about how crazy it was or disgusting. But no, now we are after the fact laughing. And to me, it seemed like it was a statement of survivorship
Sure.
where we go, "Hey, remember that time where, you know, Phil stepped on the guy hiding underneath clothes and he had a loaded shotgun with him." You're like, "Oh yeah, man,
Oh my
that was
gosh.
crazy." And we share that to say, and here we are. We
Right.
got through.
Yeah. That's wild. I can't imagine all the stories that y'all have. What after working in it as long as you did, what would you say is a good quality for an FBI agent? Like, what does somebody need to have to be able to get in this program?
I found that openness and curiosity is useful to apply in your involvement with people. So despite the technology we have, the tools we have, the rifles and everything, judicial process, eventually you have to talk to people.
Yeah.
And if you're not open to hearing what they have to say, but rather coming in with the belief that I know what's right and wrong and what the story is, you're going to have limited success. And so even if I'm encountering a criminal and he's telling me things I'm pretty sure are not true, I wanted to be open because at the very least, he's telling me what his defense is. And I may redirect or confront him with counter ideas. Um, I don't want to shut people down. And
Yeah.
if someone is a victim, I certainly want to sit and to listen and to hear what they can tell me about what they've experienced.
I read that you worked on some award-winning cases. Can you tell us anything? I know you can't tell
I
details.
can tell you,
Okay.
these are all in the public. They're
Okay.
adjudicated.
Okay,
So,
good. Well, then tell me everything.
oh, okay, great. I had I had one case. So I worked criminal. I've worked a number of violations, and it's separated as criminal or uh, national security. And I worked criminal cases for about 15 years in Chicago and then in the Cleveland division. And then one day my boss says, "Hey, we're moving you to national security to counter terrorism." And I thought, look, for 15 years, whenever there was a training or email that said national security, I just deleted it because I didn't need to know this. And at this point, hey, 15 years in, why change? But they moved me to national security. And my first case was sort of adopted off of my buddy Sean's case prior to that, where a legitimate terrorist and two brothers were funding Anwar al-Awlaki. So he was the Yemeni American voice of Al Qaeda,
Mm,
who Barack Obama later droned. And there was a controversy to that. But they were funding a terrorist. Well,
right.
that's supportive terrorism. And Sean already had a case on him. And the subject, Yahya Farouk Muhammad, was in a local jail. And one day, one of the prisoners got word that Yahya Farouk Muhammad wanted to kill his judge. And I've heard these stories before. I've had jailhouse informants, and they lie just to have fun. And I was telling there's nothing else to do but watch TV or work out.
Right.
So, I was telling Sean, like, "Oh, man, that's gonna be a hassle to find out," but we sat down with the guy, and then we wired him up to send in to talk to the subject, and I was not really thinking this would work because then the informant had to go back in and say, "Hey, when we were talking the other day, all that stuff you said about killing your judge, say that again." And so we sent him in with a concealed
Yeah.
recorder, and I'll be darned, the guy said everything again, and now we had
Wow.
some evidence.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of protocol to go through to wire
Sure.
up someone, and you've got your Sixth Amendment rights getting involved to representation. But we went through this, sent him in many times, and Yahya Farouk Muhammad saying, if I get my judge killed, I think I'll get a more lenient one that we can get out. And he drew a training camp that he wanted this guy to build for him. And he said, I want to put dynamite in bridge stanchions and take him down. And like he was talking about
Wow.
now going out and actually killing. So we got that all recorded and eventually had the informant tell him, I know a guy who's a hitman.
Mm.
And the crazy thing about the informant, this jailhouse informant, was he wasn't Muslim. Like, there's no reason for this Indian man
Yeah.
who was a Muslim to appeal to him because he was just like a hillbilly from Middle Ohio. But he trusted him, and this guy probably actually did know hitmen as well, just by his
Right.
upbringing. And so he said, "Yeah, call this guy." And so we had an undercover, called him. He said it's going to be $1,000. We had code words involved. And then we sent the undercover to Chicago where Yahya Farouk Muhammad's family was. And this very religious Muslim family, the wife met with a man by herself, which a Muslim woman would not do,
Right.
paid him $1,000 and and then showed a photo on the undercover showed a photo on his phone to the wife. I've got it here saved. And that photo was purportedly of the judge having been shot in the head.
Oh my gosh.
And we had our team work up a picture and needed somebody to play the role of a 70-year-old Lebanese man. And so one of my buddies was that. And I always tease him that, yeah, when we needed a body double for a 70-year-old Lebanese man, you were the guy. Um, and so we ended up getting him on 26 and a half years
Wow.
for the terrorist financing as well as attempted murder of a judge.
That's wild. I'm assuming they weren't all I know that wasn't easy, but getting the information, I'm assuming they weren't all like that.
No, I mean, honestly, I learned a lot because I'd been a senior agent doing criminal work for years. And, Sean said, yeah, let's see about this. And I remember thinking, like, if this was up to me and it was just my case, I don't know, maybe 50-50 that I would do it. But Sean was younger, he was hungry, and it's great to have guys like that around. And so he said, let's go. And we took a swing. And
It's
at that
awesome.
point, now I'm all in.
That's awesome. Did you find it was hard to balance, you're working with these criminals in these hard cases. Did you find it was hard to balance your personal life and your work life, maybe keep it separate and
No, so my wife and I had 3 kids along the way, and my feeling was, and I didn't get pushback for it, that I would miss time with the family because I'm getting called out for SWAT or we've got late night surveillance or wire shifts to listen to phone taps. And if I was available all the other times, if I'm not out golfing all day Saturday, if I'm not hanging out at the bar, then that's acceptable. The I presume, and I didn't get pushback, that the family understood, okay, this is necessary here,
right.
and it's not always like this.
Yeah.
This is an occasion. We understand dad's job. But the funny thing for me is that when I started out in the FBI, my wife was always worries like, "Oh, I hope you'll be safe and you need to text me."
Yeah.
And we're living in Chicago, and I said, "Honey, I'm not getting shot. I'm gonna end up dying from a car accident more likely." And then it changed to the point where I'd been in, 15, 20 years, and I'd say to my wife, "Oh, hey, we've got a SWAT hit on Tuesday." And she says, "Okay, I'll put it on the calendar." And I go, "Well, the guy's kinda dangerous." She goes, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I got you." I said, you know, he said he wouldn't go back to prison. He's got a homicide conviction already." And she's like, I told you I'd put it on the calendar. What more do you want?" And, so she got to be comfortable. It's like, "Hey,
Right.
it's dangerous." And Eric goes out, but he's always come back.
Yeah. Did any of your kids, were they ever interested in joining the FBI or being a part of that?
No, and I try to convince them. I'm like, "Hey, this is a great job." And
Yeah.
my kids would say, "You hate your job." I was like, "No, I don't. I love it." It's like, "Well, you're always complaining." Like, "Well, yes, because I know how great it could be, and then here's the one thing that, I wanna see change." But I was amazed that the kids, I'd say, "Hey, you want me to come talk to your school or class?" They're
Right.
like, "Nah, nah,
Wow. That's too funny. What do
maybe someday, maybe
Yeah,
someday."
maybe someday. What do you think are some misconceptions that people have about the FBI?
Uh, there are 2 FBIs. That's not a misconception, that's the headlines that you read about, or the arguments people have online about what the FBI is doing and the propriety of it, that's DC. That's headquarters.
Yeah.
And then there's the 99% of the FBI, which works in your town or nearby, and they're just good and honest men and women trying to bring justice to their community. And the last thing they want is somebody from DC to get involved. The
Yeah.
last thing they want is to be directed by someone else who doesn't know what their community needs. So most of what people see and want to argue about has nothing to do with the majority of what the FBI does.
Yeah. I think that's important to know. So I know you were a pastor for a while and you were an FBI agent. Both difficult jobs, both fulfilling, probably in very different ways.
Yeah. So here you are, Shara, 20 minutes in and you bury the lead that I started out as a pastor. And then I jumped into the FBI.
You did. You did. All that I read about you mostly was about that. But I mean, we've been involved in church ministry for many years, and I've never wanted my husband to be a pastor. I
Oh,
might want him to be an FBI agent more.
yeah. The change that I made from pastor in the Baptist church to FBI agent was necessitated because I had to find a job with less stress.
Right.
And it, and most people will laugh at it. And then, but if you're involved in a church, you go, "No,
No, I know.
no, I
I know.
get it."
Yeah.
The things I will end up spending eternity in heaven by my theology with some of the people I hate the most. Because I have no reason to doubt their salvation, but
Right.
you know, when
It's the
bad
people.
guys yeah, when bad guys act like bad guys, you go, "Oh, yeah, that's
Right.
how they're supposed to be." And then you have Christians, church members who act differently than they should. You're like, that's a betrayal.
Yeah.
That shouldn't happen."
Yeah. I totally get that. Totally get that. What are some lessons you learned from both careers that you still take with you today?
Well, I saw people in the church who were coming to me and saying, "Pastor, I've done something wrong. I don't like what my life is. I need to change." And then in the FBI, I was seeing those same people, except they didn't want to change and they just
Right.
wanted to follow that same route. So it's, without getting too spiritual about it, in some ways it's about repentance. It's about recognizing wrong,
Right.
because you're gonna make mistakes and I'm gonna make mistakes and I'm gonna make them intentionally. And then I need to collect myself and say, that's not who I want to be,
Right.
as opposed to saying, screw it, here we go.
Yeah.
What does it matter if I hurt people?
Yeah. Gosh, that's good. For anybody that's listening now, like I said earlier, maybe they're thinking about getting into law enforcement. Maybe they're thinking about it. Maybe it's a dream that they had. What is some encouragement you can give or some advice you could give before starting that process?
Well, the FBI holds the best people I've ever met in my life.
Wow.
Great, competent people, really dedicated. And the process for getting into the FBI is pretty strict, and so for the most part, most of the people have to be decent people,
Yeah.
or your background or your criminal history is gonna show up. So, it's a high class of people, well educated, and I enjoyed my time with them. So there's that. I would endorse the FBI as a job, as a career to anyone. And then there's policing, which is much different and
Yeah.
can be harder. And you're exposed to more brutal things sometimes in derision. And but in some ways you can feel better because you are active more
Sure.
on on the streets with people. So uh, I think for me, when I got to work in the church, I felt like that was a noble calling.
Yeah.
When I changed over to law enforcement, I felt like that was a noble calling. So I was blessed twice to
Yeah.
not only earn a living for my family, but to do something good for my neighborhood too.
Yeah. I can see that. I mean, both are you're helping other people, which is, we're supposed to be doing that. Is there anything I have not asked you about? I mean, I could ask you questions about what you did for so long all day long because I think it's fascinating, but is there anything you want to talk about that I didn't ask you about?
Well, all these stories and so many more are in my upcoming book, which
Yay.
which is called Irreverend:
Okay.
From Saving Souls to Chasing Sinners
I
in the
love
FBI.
it. When is it coming out?
It'll be coming out in the fall,
Okay.
and we've got the website will be coming up soon. But until then, people can follow me on Instagram at _Eric_Robinson or on LinkedIn, and you'll get some idea of what I'm like. The book is very much a story of what would happen if you pulled a pastor from the Baptist pulpit who's never handled a gun and stuck him
Right.
in the FBI,
Wow.
and what are some of the crazy and remarkable stories about the stuff he ran into along the way.
That's awesome. Well, you can see I do like to read, but I'm following you on Instagram, so I'm gonna keep up with that because that, I'm sure, is going to be awesome. I'm excited to read that. This has been so fun, Eric. Thank you for not being scary.
Well, yeah, people who say I'm afraid of possibly breaking the law are not the ones that we usually show up at their doors.
That's what I would think. That's what I would think. A long time ago, we had somebody break into our house. It was a house we were trying to sell. We were not there, and somebody broke in. And the insurance agent was talking about, we didn't have an alarm on the house, but we were talking about locks and replacing the locks. And she said, locks only keep honest people out. I'm
Absolutely.
like, that is true. So, yes, I don't want to break the law, but this has been so fun.
I'm glad. So for me, I was the one who broke the locks on your house because I was the breacher for our SWAT team.
Gotcha.
And I went from preacher to
To be
breacher.
sure. I love it. That's awesome. Eric, thank you so much for talking to me. I can't wait to share this with people. This has been so fun.
Well, thanks for having me, Share.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.